Marcus Reen woke to the hum of recycled air and silence that pressed against his eardrums like physical pressure. He kept his eyes closed for 17 seconds, a habit formed over 6 months of identical mornings in quarters designed by people who'd never asked what comfort meant to a human. The bed was too firm. Gravity was 0.87 standard, just enough off to make his joints ache. Temperature held at 18 Celsius, because that was optimal for Velthara physiology. He dressed in grey synthetic fabric, shirt, pants, boots slightly too narrow. He'd been a maintenance engineer on a colony transport. Before that, salvage on lunar stations. Before that, other things he didn't examine in the small hours when sleep wouldn't come. The face in the mirror was 42 and looked older. Dark hair greying at temples, lines around eyes from squinting at welding arcs. He was competent. 20 years in space construction required knowing exactly what you were doing at every moment. Competence had kept him employed, kept him alive, kept him moving, because movement was easier than stopping. Now he was stopped. Now he was the most valuable resource on a dying station. The door chimed. His first session would begin in 10 minutes. Marcus poured water, drank standing, set the cup in the recycler. Every movement automatic. The corridor curved with the station's rotation, walls bone-colored and faintly luminescent. His footsteps made no sound. The Velthara moved silently as cultural practice, and the station had absorbed that silence. Dr. Silreth waited outside the medical chamber, her translucent skin showing faint tracery of veins beneath, her large, dark, pupilless eyes tracking his approach. She'd discovered his effect, built the protocols that had turned Marcus from rescued survivor into critical resource. "Marcus Wren," she said, voice soft and sibilant. "The morning rotation is prepared." He nodded. Words weren't necessary. The Velthara spoke when communication was required, silence otherwise. The chamber was warm. 3 chairs in semicircle, monitoring equipment in walls, soft light that made Velthara's skin glow from within. The first patient was already seated, Tarvek, an engineer. Early-stage hollow tremor in his left hand, barely visible, but growing. He stood when Marcus entered. "Please," Tarvek said. Marcus took the central chair and extended his arm. Tarvek placed both hands around his forearm, fingers cool and slightly damp. Contact was light at first, then the grip tightened. Marcus felt the tremor still beneath his skin. He watched it happen every time and still didn't understand it. Some cascade of neurotransmitters his brain produced, some accident of biochemistry that stabilized Velthara neural pathways. The mechanism didn't matter, only the effect. The second patient entered, Virani, an administrator whose hollow had progressed until her movements grew vague. She placed her hand on his shoulder, her head tilting until it rested against his upper arm. Marcus felt her weight, her coolness, her breath cycling faster than human normal. The third patient was late. When the door opened, Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Kerith. She moved with careful precision, fighting neural degradation through will, her body thin even by Velthara standards, her skin showing faint darkening that marked advanced hollow. She sat in the third chair and placed her hand over his heart. The monitoring equipment registered contact. Somewhere Dr. Silreth watched data streams. Somewhere the consensus calculated optimal distribution of his time. Marcus closed his eyes and felt 3 people breathing against his skin, felt their need like physical pressure, felt his own body responding. This clinical intimacy felt like connection after so much isolation. The session lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, Tarvek's hand was steady. Virani's eyes had cleared. Kerith's breathing had deepened into something almost peaceful. They thanked him. Marcus said nothing. He returned to his quarters and stood under water slightly too cold, scrubbing skin that remembered every point of contact, and tried not to count how many sessions he had left that day. 4 more. 4 more rotations of bodies arranging themselves around him. The door chimed. Marcus entered and took his seat and extended his arms, and the weight of necessary things settled onto his shoulders like it did every day, heavy and constant and impossible to set down. The third week was when they started bringing children. Dr. Silreth brought the first one in, something that might have been apology in how she held her too thin body. The child was maybe 7 in human years, small, barely reaching his knee. Her eyes were clouded grey that marked early hollow, and her hands shook when she reached for him. "Her name is Lyris," Dr. Silreth said. "She will not speak. The degradation has affected language centers." Marcus looked at the child and felt something crack in the center of his chest, some seal he'd placed there when he decided detachment was the only way to survive this. Children made it impossible to pretend this was just a job. Lyris climbed into his lap with uncertain movements. Marcus caught her automatically and felt her settle against his chest with a small sound that might have been relief. She was so light. Marcus felt her heartbeat against his ribs, rapid and bird-fragile, and tried not to think about what it meant that they were bringing him children who might not remember their own names by next month. The session lasted 30 minutes. Lyris didn't move except to breathe. When the timer sounded, she was lifted away by an attendant. Lyris looked back at him as she was carried out. Her eyes were clearer. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed and counted ceiling panels and tried not to calculate how many children might be waiting. He got up at what would have been 3 a.m., abandoned sleep, and walked the corridors. The station was never fully dark. The Velthara didn't sleep the way humans did. In Section 9, he found an observation deck. The stars were different here, patterns he didn't know. Earth was somewhere in that darkness, unthinkably distant. He'd had a daughter once. 8 years old when he'd taken the colony transport contract. 12 when he'd stopped answering her mother's messages because guilt of being absent was worse than silence of being gone. 18 now, an adult, living a life he knew nothing about. Marcus pressed his palm against the observation port and felt the cold, felt absolute zero waiting just beyond. He'd been running for 24 years, running from the feeling that he'd never been the person his daughter needed. Now he couldn't run. Now necessity was its own kind of prison. "You don't sleep." Carith stood in the entrance, her body backlit by corridor glow. She wore simple pale robe that made her darkening skin stand out. "Neither do you," Marcus said. She moved to stand beside him. They'd had 17 sessions together. Marcus knew the exact weight of her hand on his shoulder, the rhythm of her breathing when she settled against him. "I sleep less now," Carith said. "The hollow takes rest before it takes consciousness. Soon I will not sleep at all, then I will not wake." Marcus had no response to that. "Do you regret it?" Carith asked. "Staying. I don't remember being given a choice." "You were. The consensus agreed you could leave after the first tests. We would have provided a ship, supplies, navigation data." Marcus turned to look at her. "When?" "The first week. Before we understood how much we needed you. Before it became impossible to leave without being responsible for deaths that would follow." "I don't regret staying," he said, and found it was almost true. Carith was silent for a long time. Then, "I regret touching you." The words hung in the air. "Not because it doesn't help," Carith continued. "It does. But touching is not. We are not built for this kind of proximity. You're teaching us to need something our culture spent millennia learning to live without." "I'm not teaching anything. I'm just sitting there." "You're warm," Carith said. "Your species generates heat, we don't. When I position against you, I can feel it through the medical gown, through my skin, into my body. I am learning what warmth feels like, and I will lose it when the hollow takes me." Marcus understood then what she was actually saying. The Velthara were dying twice, once to the hollow and once to adaptation that made his presence bearable. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. It's necessary. Necessary changes are not tragedies. They are simply what must be done to survive." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers cool and slightly damp, her grip tentative. Not part of a session, not monitored. Just contact between two beings stuck in a situation neither had chosen. Marcus held her hand and felt her pulse against his palm, faster than human, lighter. They stood like that while the station rotated through its cycle. When Carith finally released his hand and left without speaking, Marcus stayed at the observation port until the lighting cycled back to morning. His palm still felt cool where she'd touched him. The sessions multiplied. Marcus lost track of days because days were just containers for sessions now. Morning rotation, midday rotation, evening rotation, and increasingly, deep cycle sessions for individuals whose hollow warranted emergency scheduling. Dr. Silreth managed logistics with precision, tracking improvement rates, degradation speeds, optimal contact duration. Marcus learned to recognize people by touch. Kerith he could have found in complete darkness, but others too. Tavik with his precisely measured grip, Virani who smelled faintly of environmental processing chemicals, little Lyris whose heartbeat was faster than it should be, the musician whose fingers never stopped moving, the botanist who grew warmer during sessions, the administrator who cried silently, the engineer who fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder. He learned their breathing. He learned which ones relaxed immediately and which ones fought their cultural conditioning. He learned who needed silence and who needed the reassurance of his voice saying their name. His quarters became a space he passed through between sessions. Sleep became something he did in 3-hour increments. He ate when Dr. Silreth insisted, standing at the dispenser, consuming nutrition paste that tasted like every emergency ration he'd ever choked down. Morning rotation, 6 patients, 90 minutes total, distributed in pairs. Midday rotation, individual sessions for advanced cases, 30 minutes each, 4 scheduled. Evening rotation, the children. Always the children at the end. Putting them last meant he spent the whole day bracing, but it also meant he could be fully present when they came. Lyris came 3 times a week. Other children joined, Merith, who was 7 and wouldn't look at him, Solan, who was 10 and asked questions in a language Marcus couldn't understand, Tiny Veris, who was perhaps 4 and slept against his chest. The children improved faster than adults, but degraded faster too when sessions were missed. Marcus became a calendar they were measured against. 2 months became 3, 3 became 4. The Velthara consensus debated his sustainability. Dr. Silreth summarized, they were concerned about his health, considering reducing session frequency. Don't, Marcus said. The data suggests you are approaching dangerous levels of exhaustion. The data can suggest whatever it wants. Reduce the sessions and people die faster. You may die faster. I'm not dying, I'm just tired. But he was more than tired. He was hollowing out. Sleep deprivation had become baseline. Constant physical contact had rewired something so that silence felt wrong. Solitude felt like failure. He would sit in his quarters and feel the absence of other bodies, like missing limbs. The isolation he'd spent 24 years maintaining had inverted. He was never alone, and the never-aloneness was making him disappear. In the 4th month, they brought an observer during deep cycle rotation. The consensus had decided sessions should be monitored more closely. The observer's name was Therin. Young, no signs of hollow yet. They sat in the corner during Kerith's session and watched. Kerith pressed her back against Marcus's chest. His arms came up automatically, loosely circling her, hands resting on her forearms. Her breathing slowed, the tremor stilled. Therin made notes. How does it feel? Therin asked Kerith. Kerith was silent for a long moment. Then, necessary. Does it cause discomfort? Yes. Does the discomfort diminish with repeated exposure? Marcus felt Kerith's heartbeat against his palm, where his hand rested near her shoulder. No, Kerith said. It accumulates. Explain accumulation. Each session teaches my body to want warmth, to seek proximity, to believe that contact means safety. These are not things we are meant to want, but I want them now. I think about this human's presence when I am alone. I anticipate sessions. I measure time by when I will next be touched. This is accumulation. Marcus felt Kerith's words settle into his bones. He'd started anticipating individual patients, recognizing their approach by footstep sound, feeling something like gladness when certain people entered the chamber. Is this problematic? Therin asked. I don't know, Kerith said. I won't live long enough to find out. When Kerith was gone, Therin approached. Do you experience accumulation? Marcus looked at this young Velthara who would probably survive, who would inherit a society fundamentally changed. Yes, Marcus said. Is it problematic? Marcus thought about Lyris's weight, about Kerith's hand finding his in the observation deck, about how he'd started to need being needed. I don't know, he said. Therin made a note. We will not need to do this in 20 years. We will have synthesized your effect or found an alternative. You are a temporary solution. Right, Marcus said. Temporary. He returned to his quarters and lay in bed and felt his body remember every point of contact from the day's sessions, felt the accumulation Kerith had named, the way he was learning to measure his own value by how much of himself he could give away. Dr. Silreth arrived at his quarters outside scheduled rotations, immediately signaling crisis. "The consensus has revised protocols," she said. "We need to increase your session frequency." Marcus set down his water. "I'm already doing 3 rotations daily plus deep cycle twice a week. The degradation rate is accelerating. We believe the hollow is adapting." The words landed like physics, inevitable, impersonal. Adapting how? "Patients who are stable are relapsing faster. The effect of your presence is diminishing in duration." Dr. Silreth's voice remained steady. "We need longer sessions, more frequent contact. The consensus projects that within 2 months we will require continuous proximity protocols." Continuous? Yes. Marcus understood. Continuous meant no breaks between sessions. Continuous meant patients rotating through in shifts. Continuous meant he would become a permanent installation. "That's not sustainable," Marcus said. "No, but the alternative is accepting that we will lose everyone to the hollow within a year." "What about synthesis?" "We are working on it. Progress is slow. We need more time. Time requires your continued presence." "How long until the continuous protocols start?" 1 week. "We are modifying the medical chamber now." "Provisions for minimal movement," Marcus said. "You mean restraints?" "We mean accommodations for your safety." Dr. Silreth studied him. "You could still refuse." "And watch everyone die. That would not be your responsibility." Marcus laughed without humor. "That's exactly what it would be. You've made it my responsibility. Every person I've touched, they're my responsibility now." After Dr. Silreth left, Marcus sat in his quarters and stared at walls that had been his only privacy. 1 week. 7 days before he crossed into something else entirely. He should have felt rage. But rage required energy Marcus didn't have. The chime sounded for evening rotation. The children would be waiting. Marcus found Lyris already in the chair. She looked up when he entered, and her clouded eyes cleared slightly. He sat down and she climbed into his lap, her weight settling against his chest, her head tucking under his chin. Her heartbeat was still too fast, but stronger than it had been. Marcus held her and felt his future crystallizing into something inevitable. Continuous protocols, rotating patients, his body becoming a permanent anchor point. 1 week. He had 1 week to figure out how to be a person before he became a function. The new medical chamber resembled a temple, circular, with soft lighting from bioluminescent panels. At the center was a chair designed for someone who would occupy it for extended periods. Monitoring equipment was built into the arms. Waste management systems were integrated beneath. Nutrition feeds hung ready on articulated arms. Dr. Silreth gave him the tour 3 days before continuous protocols began. Patients would cycle through in 90-minute shifts. Attendants would monitor his vitals. The chair could recline to allow rest periods without breaking contact. "You will be able to sleep," she said. "The schedule includes designated rest periods where patients will maintain contact but remain silent and still. So I'll sleep while being touched by strangers." "Yes." Marcus circled the chair, studying the thing that would become his entire world. "When do I get out?" Marcus asked. "Initially 20-hour cycles with 4-hour breaks. If that proves unsustainable, we will adjust. Adjust down, if necessary." "I want one modification," Marcus said. Dr. Silreth tilted her head. "I want to see outside, a real viewport. I want to see stars. The medical chamber has no exterior exposure, but we can relocate to Section 9, where there are observation ports." "Thank you." 3 days later, Marcus walked into the relocated chamber and saw the viewport integrated into the far wall, 3 meters of transparent material showing the void beyond. The chair faced it directly. The first continuous cycle began at 6 a.m. Marcus settled into the chair while attendants adjusted monitoring equipment, secured the stabilization harness loosely across his chest and thighs. The first patient arrived exactly on schedule. Tarvek took position behind the chair, his hands on Marcus's shoulders. The timer started. 90 minutes. Marcus watched the stars and felt Tarvek's tremor still, and tried not to think about the 23 more patients who would cycle through before his first break. Tarvek's session ended. The next patient arrived before Marcus could fully register the absence. Smooth transition, one set of hands replacing another, then another. Then another. 6 hours in, Kerith arrived. She didn't take position behind the chair. She knelt beside it instead, her hands on his forearm, her head resting against his shoulder. Marcus felt her weight settle with the familiarity of repetition. "They're killing you," Kerith said quietly. Marcus turned his head slightly to look at her. "They're trying to save you. The two are not mutually exclusive." She was right. "How bad is it?" Marcus asked, meaning her hollow. "Bad enough that I requested this time slot specifically. Bad enough that I wanted to see you while I can still remember why it matters." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He looked forward to her sessions. He noticed her absence when she wasn't scheduled. "You matter," Marcus said. "You matter regardless of whether you remember." "That's a very human thing to say." "I'm a very human thing." Kerith's fingers tightened on his forearm. "I am learning what it means to care for someone. It is not a Velthara concept. We have collective responsibility, mutual obligation. But care. Individual care for another individual. This is new." Marcus understood what she was confessing. The Velthara didn't have words for emotional attachment to specific people. "I care about you too," Marcus said, and felt the truth of it land somewhere behind his sternum, heavy and permanent and completely useless. Kerith's 90 minutes ended too quickly. An attendant arrived, and Kerith stood with slow deliberation. She looked down at Marcus, and he saw something in her expression that translated across species: regret, longing, the particular ache of wanting something that circumstances rendered impossible. Then she was gone, and another patient took her place. The first 20-hour cycle ended at 2 a.m. Attendants helped Marcus from the chair, his legs barely functional. He stumbled to his quarters, fell into bed, and slept for 3 hours and 47 minutes. Then the cycle began again. Days blurred. Marcus stopped tracking time by dates and started tracking by rotations, by the number of patients who'd passed through. His world contracted to the chair, the view, the endless sequence of bodies. The Velthara improved. Children who'd been hovering on the edge of permanent degradation stabilized. Adults regained coherence. The protocols were working. Marcus was disappearing. In the third week of continuous cycles during Kerith's rotation, she did something unprecedented. She brought something with her, a small object that she pressed into Marcus's hand. He looked down and saw a piece of polished stone, dark and smooth, warm from being held. "What is this?" "From my homeworld. I've carried it since leaving. It's the only thing I own that isn't standard station issue." Kerith's voice was soft. "I want you to have it. So there's something in this room that's here because of choice, not necessity." Marcus closed his fingers around the stone and felt its weight, felt the care embedded in the gesture. "Thank you," he said, and meant it with an intensity that scared him. Kerith's hand found his, her cool fingers wrapping around his fist that held the stone. They sat like that for the remainder of her session, connected through layers of touch. When her time ended and she stood to leave, Kerith looked back once. Marcus met her eyes and saw his own impossible longing reflected there. Then she was gone, and the next patient arrived, and Marcus held the stone from an alien homeworld, while strangers pressed against him seeking relief. He could provide from everything except the ache of caring for someone he could never actually hold. The collapse started small, microscopic cracks accumulating until the whole system reached critical stress. Marcus noticed it first in his hands. They'd started trembling during rest periods. Dr. Silreth noticed too, ran tests that showed elevated cortisol and neural activity patterns consistent with chronic stress. She recommended reducing cycle length. The consensus rejected the recommendation. They couldn't afford to give him more rest, so the trembling continued, spread to his legs. Manifested as muscle spasms in his back, tension headaches that built behind his eyes. Dr. Silreth adjusted his nutrition feeds, adding supplements. It helped minimally. In the 5th week of continuous protocols, a child died. Not one Marcus had been treating. A child from outer stations, too far gone. The child had been brought to him anyway, laid against his chest while parents stood nearby and hoped. Marcus had held that small body and felt nothing change. Had felt death approaching with the certainty of physics. The child had died during the session, had simply stopped breathing while Marcus's arms were around them. They'd taken the body away, brought the next patient in. The rotation had continued because the rotation always continued. That night Marcus broke. It started as crying, silent tears he couldn't stop, then shaking that was different from the tremors, his whole body convulsing. The attendants called Dr. Silreth. She came and stood beside the chair and didn't try to stop him, just bore witness. "I can't," he said when he could speak. "I can't keep doing this. I know. I held a child while they died, and then held another child 10 minutes later like nothing happened." Dr. Silreth was quiet for a long time. Then, "The consensus is convening emergency session. We cannot continue like this. You are correct. There are no alternatives. Then we will have to accept higher degradation rates. The mathematics are clear. Losing you entirely helps no one. Losing me like I'm already gone. Aren't you?" The question landed like truth. Marcus looked down at his trembling hands, at the monitoring equipment, at the viewport beyond. He was gone. Had been gone for weeks. "I want to see Kerith," Marcus said. "It is not her scheduled rotation." "I know. I want to see her anyway. Please." There was a long pause. Then Dr. Silreth nodded. Kerith arrived 30 minutes later. She looked at Marcus in the chair, saw the tear tracks, the trembling, and something in her expression fractured. "They're killing you," she said again. "Probably." She approached the chair and did something she'd never done before. Climbed into it with him, arranged herself sideways across his lap despite the monitoring equipment. Marcus's arms came up automatically to hold her, and she pressed her face against his neck and was silent. They sat like that for a long time. The attendants didn't intervene. Marcus felt Kerith's weight against him, felt her coolness seeping into his overheated skin, felt her breathing gradually synchronize with his own. This was different from sessions. This wasn't about stabilization. This was two people who'd learned to care for each other, sitting with the impossible fact that caring wasn't enough. "I'm going to forget you," Kerith said against his neck. "The hollow is taking memory now. Soon I won't remember sessions. Won't remember your name. Won't remember this moment." Marcus's arms tightened around her. "I'll remember. That doesn't help. I know." They stayed like that until Kerith's breathing evened into sleep. Marcus held her and watched stars rotate and felt something fundamental shift. He'd thought necessity was enough, thought being needed would fill the emptiness. But necessity without choice was just another kind of disappearing. Kerith woke after an hour. She didn't apologize. She just looked at Marcus with eyes that were starting to cloud over and said, "When I forget everything else, I hope I remember that you were kind." Then she left, and Marcus was alone with attendants and the weight of knowing that kindness wasn't the same as being good. Dr. Silreth returned with the consensus decision. They were reducing his cycles to 16 hours with 8-hour breaks. It wasn't enough, but it was what the mathematics allowed. Marcus nodded acceptance and settled back into the routine of bodies and touch and slow accumulation of damage that no biochemistry could reverse. The stone Kerith had given him stayed in his hand, warm from constant holding, the only thing in his world that was there because someone had chosen to care. The 8-hour breaks became sacred time, though Marcus couldn't have explained what made them sacred beyond the simple fact that his body belonged to himself during those periods. He used the breaks poorly. Slept when he should have eaten, ate when he should have moved. The attendants tried to implement structured routines, but Marcus ignored them. Structure during breaks felt like extension of protocols. Dr. Silreth stopped trying to manage his break time. Instead, she left supplements and nutrition packs in his quarters. The station had entered its 6th month of continuous protocols. The Velthara population was stabilizing, not recovering but no longer collapsing at the rate they'd been before. They were surviving because Marcus was disappearing. He noticed it in small ways, forgetting words, not just Velthara terms, but English ones too. Losing time, hours vanishing into dissociative gaps, failing to recognize his own reflection. The tremors had become permanent. Dr. Silreth ran more tests, added more supplements, quietly documented his decline. During one break period, Marcus made his way to the observation deck where he'd first talked with Kerith. The deck was empty. He stood at the viewport and looked at stars he still didn't recognize and tried to remember what Earth's sky had looked like. Tried to remember his daughter's face. The memories were there but distant, like stories about someone else. "You look like you're planning to leave." Therin, the young observer, approached the viewport and stood at careful distance. Can't leave, Marcus said. People would die. People will die regardless. The hollow is adapting faster than we can synthesize your effect. Within another 6 months, continuous protocols won't be sufficient either. There is no more. I'm already giving everything. I know. Theron was quiet. The consensus is discussing whether to wake additional humans from the ship that brought you here. Marcus turned to look at them. You said the crew was dead. Most were. 3 remain in cryostasis. We didn't wake them initially because their medical readings showed trauma. But if they share your biochemistry, wake them, Marcus said immediately. They may not survive the process. Wake them anyway. Or, Theron said carefully, we could accept that we are losing this fight, could allocate remaining resources to preserving knowledge, documenting our culture. Marcus stared at Theron. They were asking permission to give up. No, Marcus said. Why not? Because I know what it feels like to give up. I've been doing it my whole life, and I'm telling you it doesn't help. It doesn't make anything better. It just means you die empty instead of die trying. Theron's large dark eyes studied him. You think dying while trying is preferable? I think it's the only thing that means anything. That is a very human philosophy. I'm a very human thing, Marcus said. It's pretty much all I have left. The next session included a new patient, a young Velthara early-stage hollow, frightened. They sat rigidly behind the chair, their hands barely touching Marcus's shoulders. First session? Marcus asked quietly. Yes. I believed I could resist. That willpower would be sufficient. But the hollow doesn't care about will. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't care about much of anything. Does this help? The contact? Or is it just... They stopped. Marcus understood. Whether the sessions were genuine treatment or just placebo. It helps, Marcus said. I feel it happen every time. Your neural patterns stabilize, your symptoms reduce. It's real. The patient's grip on his shoulders tightened slightly. Thank you. For staying. For doing this. I know it cannot be easy. Easy. As though ease was something that existed anymore. You're welcome, he said instead. The session ended. Another began. Then another. The rotation continued, and Marcus sat at the center of it watching stars shift and holding Kerith's stone. The consensus voted to wake the others. Marcus heard about it from Dr. Silrith during a routine examination in his 6th month. 3 humans would be brought out of cryostasis, their biochemistry analyzed. When? Marcus asked. The process has already begun. We should know within 3 days whether any of them share your effect. 3 days. Marcus tried to feel hope, but hope required energy he didn't have. The first of them died during revival. Dr. Silrith delivered this information with visible distress. The human had been young, female, too damaged to survive. The second survived revival but lacked Marcus's biochemistry. Tests showed normal human neural patterns. They were alive but useless for the hollow crisis. The third was named Sarah Chen, and she had Marcus's effect. Stronger even. Her biochemistry produced the same protective cascade, but in higher concentrations. She worked better than Marcus. Dr. Silrith brought him this news during a break period. We're implementing protocols for Sarah Chen. She'll begin rotations tomorrow. Marcus set down the supplement packet. Good. That's good. We can reduce your cycles, split the load, give your body time to recover. Recovery? The word sounded fictional. How much reduction? Potentially down to 8-hour cycles with 16-hour breaks, possibly less if Sarah's tolerance is high. 8 hours instead of 16, breaks long enough to sleep properly. Marcus should have felt relief, should have felt the burden lifting, should have felt something other than the strange emptiness that came with realizing he might not be necessary anymore. When do I meet her? He asked. Tomorrow, after her first rotation. The next day he finished his reduced cycle, only 8 hours, but they felt longer somehow. When the last patient left, Marcus asked to be taken to meet Sarah Chen. They found her in a private recovery room, sitting on a medical bed and staring at her hands. She looked up when he entered, and Marcus saw she was maybe 30, with short dark hair and eyes that held the particular exhaustion of someone who'd just learned they were trapped. You're Marcus Wren, she said. Yeah. They told me you've been doing this for 6 months. About that. Sarah looked down at her hands again. They were steady, no tremors yet. How do you stand it? Marcus pulled over a chair and sat. Mostly I don't. I just keep showing up because not showing up means people die faster. That's not an answer. That's just description of the problem. She was right. I don't know how to stand it. I just stand it anyway. Some days that feels like strength and some days it feels like I've forgotten how to fall down. Sarah studied him. You look terrible. Thanks. No, I mean, you look like you're dying. Are you dying? Marcus considered the question seriously. Probably. Slower than Velthara without us would die. That's the math that matters. Fuck that math. The vehemence caught Marcus off guard. Sarah stood and paced the small room with energy that seemed impossible. I didn't ask to wake up into this, she said. Didn't ask to be some kind of biological resource. And now they're telling me I have to do what you've been doing, have to let strangers touch me for hours every day, have to save people I don't know by using up pieces of myself I can't get back. Yeah, Marcus said. That's pretty much exactly it. Sarah stopped pacing and looked at him. How are you not furious? I was. For the first few weeks I was so angry I couldn't sleep. Then I got tired of being angry. Then I just got tired. That's not better. I know. They sat in silence for a while. The Velthara aren't bad people, Marcus said finally. They're just desperate. Maybe. Probably. But that doesn't make it okay. Doesn't make this consensual just because the alternative is worse. Marcus thought about freedom to refuse that was actually cage. No. It doesn't make it okay. It just makes it necessary. Fuck necessity, too. Marcus found himself almost smiling. You're going to have a hard time with this if you keep thinking that way. Good. I should have a hard time. We both should. The day this stops being hard is the day we've lost something we can't afford to lose. She was right. The hardness was the only thing that kept this human. They'll give you protocols tomorrow, Marcus said. Start you on shorter sessions. What are the limits? I don't know. I haven't found mine yet. That's not reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you. I'm here to tell you it's survivable. Not comfortable, not okay, but survivable. Sarah sat back down. The anger was still there, but underneath Marcus could see the same thing he'd felt 6 months ago. The overwhelming weight of being necessary. Do you ever want to leave? She asked. Every day. But you don't. No. Why not? Marcus thought about Carith's stone in his quarters, about Lyris's weight against his chest. Because I know them now. The people I help. They're not abstract anymore. Walking away would mean abandoning specific people to specific suffering. That's what they count on. That's how they keep you. I know. Doesn't make it less true. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then, the hollow is taking them anyway, isn't it? No matter what we do. Yeah. So what's the point? Marcus stood up, his legs protesting. The point is that slower means more time, more moments of being themselves before they stop being anyone. That's the point, not saving them, just giving them time. He left Sarah to process that and returned to his quarters, to the 8 hours of break time, to the sleep that wouldn't come. Tomorrow they would split the load. Tomorrow he would do 8 hours instead of 16. Tomorrow. Marcus held Carith's stone and watched his quarters ceiling and tried to remember what hope felt like, when it wasn't weighed down by the knowledge that hope wasn't the same as solution. The new routine divided the day with mathematical precision. Marcus took morning and evening rotations, 8 hours total. Sarah Chen took midday and deep cycle, another 8 hours. Between them, they covered 16 hours. It should have been better. Marcus's body didn't believe the mathematics. His hands still trembled. His sleep was still fractured. The 8-hour breaks gave him time to notice how much damage he'd accumulated. He met Sarah between shifts, brief overlaps where they exchanged information about patient needs. Tarvek responds better to firm pressure, Marcus told her during one overlap. Virani needs silence. Merrick sometimes falls asleep. Let him. Sarah recorded everything with the focus of someone building a manual for surviving the impossible. She'd been doing rotations for 2 weeks and already looked tired in the way Marcus recognized. How do you keep them straight? She asked. There are hundreds of them now. You learn. Their breathing, their weight, the particular way they settle against you. After enough sessions, they're not strangers anymore. That sounds worse. It is. But it was also better. The strangers who'd become individuals, these were the things that made the sessions bearable. Carith came during his evening rotation, her movements now vague enough that attendants helped her to the chair. She took her usual position, back against his chest, and Marcus felt how much lighter she was. "How long?" Marcus asked quietly. "Weeks, maybe days. The deterioration is accelerating again." Carith's voice was thinner. "Dr. Silrith thinks the hollow is adapting to your biochemistry." Marcus had suspected as much. "I'm sorry. Don't be. You gave me months I wouldn't have had. Months of being myself, of remembering who I was." Carith's hand found his. "I used that time. Said things that needed saying. Made peace with people I'd been avoiding. You gave me that." Marcus held her hand and tried not to calculate how many other people were approaching their expiration dates. "I'll miss you," he said. "I'll forget you first," Carith said. "So you'll have to miss me enough for both of us." The session ended. Attendants helped Carith walk to the exit, and Marcus watched her leave, knowing this was probably one of their final contacts, that soon she would sit in this chair and not recognize him. Sarah found him after the rotation ended, still sitting in the chair. She didn't ask what was wrong. "Someone important?" she asked. "Yeah." "I'm sorry." "Does it get easier?" she asked, watching them decline despite everything we do. "No. You just get more practiced at carrying it." Sarah sat down on the floor beside his chair. They sat like that for a while, two humans surrounded by equipment designed to monitor their usefulness. "I met with the second survivor," Sarah said eventually. "David Park, the one who doesn't have our biochemistry. How is he?" "Angry, confused, trying to figure out what his purpose is." She paused. "He asked if we wanted to leave. Said he could try to repair the ship, could try to get us back to human space." Marcus turned to look at her. "Could he? Maybe. Would take months, probably years of work, but possible. Are you going to help him?" Sarah was quiet. Then, "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but the other part," she gestured at the chamber, "the other part knows what happens if we leave." "I know," Marcus said. "I've had that thought every day for 6 months. What keeps you from leaving?" Marcus thought about all the answers he could give. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I'm just too tired to make a different choice." Sarah nodded. "David said if we want to try leaving, to let him know. The option exists." "Okay. Are you going to think about it?" Marcus looked at the viewport, at stars that separated him from Earth and everything he'd left behind. Going back would mean confronting that daughter he'd abandoned. "No," he said. "I'm not going to think about it." "Why not?" "Because thinking about it would mean imagining a future where I'm something other than this. And I don't know how to do that anymore." Sarah studied him with an expression that might have been pity or recognition. Then she stood and offered him a hand up. They walked back toward quarters together. At the junction where their paths separated, Sarah said, "Thanks. For the guidance, for not lying about how hard this is. You're welcome. Marcus, if you ever do want to leave, tell me. We'll figure it out together." Marcus nodded, knowing he wouldn't change his mind. "Same to you." Sarah smiled, tired. "We're fucked, aren't we? Both of us. Stuck here until we break or they find another solution." "Yeah," Marcus said. "Pretty much." They separated, and Marcus lay down in bed and held Carith Stone and tried not to calculate how many weeks he had left before the person he cared about most stopped recognizing him entirely. Carith stopped recognizing him in the 7th month. She came for her session, was helped into position, and when Marcus said her name, she looked at him with eyes that held no memory. "Hello," she said, polite and distant. "Is this my first session?" Marcus felt something break that he hadn't known was still intact. "No, you've had many sessions." "I don't remember them. I don't remember much anymore." The session proceeded. Contact established, neural patterns stabilizing. But the intimacy was gone. Carith sat against him like a stranger. When she left, Marcus sat in the empty chair and felt the absence of who she'd been, felt the particular grief of losing someone while they were still alive. "Doctor." Silrith found him there an hour later. "I heard about Carith," she said. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I know she was important to you." Marcus looked at Dr. Silrith and saw the exhaustion in her too. "How do you keep going?" "The same way you do. Because stopping isn't an option." "That's not an answer." Dr. Silrith smiled slightly. "Someone else said something similar to me recently." I believe it was Sarah Chen. She's smart. So are you. Smart enough to recognize when you're reaching your limits. She paused. I'm telling you that we'll lose you soon regardless. Your body is failing. Another month, perhaps 2, and you'll collapse entirely. And then what? And then Sarah continues alone until she breaks, or until we synthesize your effect, or until the hollow adapts completely. The clinical delivery didn't hide the despair. Dr. Silreth had spent her career fighting disease, and all of it was failing anyway. Is there any hope? Marcus asked. Real hope? Dr. Silreth was quiet. Then, no, not really. We will preserve knowledge, document our culture. But the Velthara as a conscious species, we're ending. You've given us months to say goodbye. Marcus felt the weight land in his chest. 7 months of sessions for months, for farewells. I should feel like it was worth it, Marcus said. Should you? I don't know. It does mean something, just not salvation. Sometimes meaning is smaller than we want it to be. The rotations continued. Sarah took her shifts, Marcus took his, and between them they held back collapse for a population that was disappearing anyway. In the 8th month, Marcus's body began failing in ways that couldn't be ignored. Fainting during sessions, muscle spasms, cognitive gaps. Dr. Silreth reduced his rotations further. 4 hours, then 2. Then she told him he needed to stop entirely. Marcus refused, kept showing up, kept sitting in the chair while his body shook. Sarah found him there one day, slumped between patients, barely conscious. Stop, she said. You're dying. Not yet. Soon enough that the difference doesn't matter. She sat facing him. You've done enough. It's okay to stop. If I stop, people lose access to treatment. If you don't stop, you die and they lose access anyway. She paused. Marcus, you'd be human. That's enough. But it wasn't enough. Humanity without function felt like emptiness. In the end, the decision was made for him. Marcus collapsed during a session with Lyris in his 9th month. One moment he was conscious, the next was darkness and alarms. He woke in a medical bay, monitoring equipment surrounding him. Dr. Silreth and Sarah both present. No more sessions, Dr. Silreth said. Your body can't sustain them. You need months of recovery. Lyris is being transferred to Sarah's rotation. Everyone is being transferred. You're done, Marcus. Marcus tried to argue, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The words wouldn't form. He'd finally found his limits. Sarah leaned close. Rest. I'll take care of them. I promise. Marcus closed his eyes and let unconsciousness take him back into darkness, where nothing was necessary and no one needed him, and he could finally stop. Time moved differently in the medical bay. Hours blurred into days, days into weeks. Marcus floated through it in a haze of sedation and forced rest. Dr. Silreth visited daily, checking readings, adjusting medications. Sarah came between her rotations, exhausted and determined. She looked worse each time, thinner, paler, trembling. She was following his trajectory. You should stop, Marcus told her during one visit. Can't. No one else to do it. They could wake more humans. They tried. 2 more survivors. Neither had the biochemistry. It's just me now. Just her. Alone with the weight. I'm sorry, he said. Sarah shrugged. Not your fault. You lasted 9 months. I'll try to make it to 9 months. In his 3rd week of recovery, David Park visited. The engineer who couldn't help with the hollow and had poured frustration into rebuilding the ship. Thought you might want an update, David said. The ship's almost operational. Another month and we could attempt the journey back to human space. We. You, me, Sarah, if she wants. Marcus tried to imagine it. Returning to human space. To Earth, maybe. To a life that had nothing to do with Velthara or sessions. Would you go? Marcus asked. David considered. I don't know. Part of me wants to, but the other part knows that leaving means abandoning them. Neither have I, Marcus said. I'm just better at running before I get attached. That's why you stayed? Because you got attached. That's part of it. The other part is I didn't know how to be anything except useful. David nodded. Sarah told me about Kerith, about how she doesn't remember you anymore. Marcus felt the familiar ache. Yeah, that must be hard. It's necessary, Marcus said. Necessary things are not tragedies. They're simply what must be done to survive. You don't believe that? No. But it's easier than believing the alternative. The fourth week brought visitors. Velthara he'd treated, individuals whose names he remembered, even if they no longer remembered him. Tarvek came, his hands steady now. I wanted to thank you for the time you gave me. I've been able to complete research that would have been lost otherwise. Others came. Varani, Merrick, children whose hearts he'd felt beating against his chest. They thanked him. All of them thanked him. In his fifth week, Dr. Silreth came with news. They'd achieved a breakthrough in synthesis, not complete, but partial. They could now produce a compound that mimicked 20% of his effect. We're implementing production immediately, Dr. Silreth said. Sarah can reduce her rotations. Will she? I don't know, you didn't. That was true. Can you force her to stop? Marcus asked. No. She has the same freedom to refuse that you did. Then accept it. Let the Hollow win. Stop consuming people to buy time that doesn't change the outcome. Dr. Silreth studied him. If we'd had this conversation 9 months ago, would you have refused to help? Marcus thought about it. No, I would have done it anyway, but that doesn't make it right. Marcus was cleared for light activity in his 6th week. He could walk now, could control his trembling enough to feed himself, but he wasn't that person anymore. Couldn't be. 9 months of being necessary had rewritten him fundamentally. He walked the corridors during low cycle. He passed Velthara, who recognized him, who nodded with particular respect. He found Sarah in the medical chamber during a break, slumped in the chair that had been his entire world. She looked up when he entered. I'm going to collapse soon, she said without preamble. I can feel it. Maybe another month. Marcus sat down on the floor beside the chair. Then stop. Choose yourself. Can't. Too many people still need direct contact. I know. But your dying doesn't help them. Sarah was quiet. Then, did you ever figure out how to stop? How to choose yourself over being necessary? No. My body chose for me. I'm still not sure I would have stopped otherwise. That's fucked up. Yeah. David says the ship's almost ready, Sarah said eventually. Says we could leave in a few weeks if we wanted. Are you going to? Are you? Marcus thought about returning to human space, to Earth, to a daughter named Emma who was 26 now. I don't know, he said. Part of me wants to, but the other part knows that leaving means abandoning them. Yeah. Sarah leaned her head back. We're so fucked, both of us. Stuck between wanting to save ourselves and not being able to live with the guilt of leaving. Maybe that's just what being human means. Being stuck between impossible choices and making them anyway. The timer chimed for Sarah's next rotation. She stood with visible effort. Sarah? She paused. It's okay to stop, if you need to. I'll understand. She looked back at him, and Marcus saw the same impossible decision written across her face. Then she smiled, tired and sad. Thanks. But we both know I won't. She left, and Marcus sat in the empty chamber and held Kerith's stone and tried to figure out what choice actually meant when all the options led to some form of loss. The synthesis helped. Over following weeks, distribution expanded. Protocols were refined, and efficacy climbed to 30%, then 40%. Sarah cut her sessions from 8 hours to 6, then to 4. Her body began recovering, but the mathematics were still trending toward ending. The Hollow continued adapting. Patients who'd been stable relapsed. The slow collapse resumed. Dr. Silreth delivered this during one of Marcus's recovery checkups. We estimate 18 months remaining before the Hollow overcomes all interventions. 18 months, a year and a half of consciousness remaining for an entire species, time that Marcus and Sarah had purchased with their bodies. Is it worth it? Marcus asked. Everything we did. Was it worth 18 months? Doctor. Silreth was quiet. Then, I don't know. Ask me in 18 months when I'm losing my ability to answer. Marcus thought about Kerith, who'd told him the sessions gave her time to say what needed saying. Maybe that was worth it. Maybe meaning was just that small. Not salvation, just time. He started attending consensus meetings as observer. The debates were careful, measured, shot through with Velthara preference for consensus. But underneath, Marcus heard the same desperation. During one meeting, a young Velthara proposed something that made the room go silent. They should stop all interventions, should let the hollow progress naturally, should use remaining resources to ensure peaceful deaths. The proposal was rejected, but the fact that it had been raised indicated how close they were to the edge. Sarah found him after one meeting, at the observation deck where he'd started spending recovery time. "David's leaving," she said without preamble. Marcus turned. "When?" "2 weeks. Ship's ready. He offered us slots on the crew." "Are you going?" Sarah leaned against the viewport. "I don't know. The synthesis is working well enough that my sessions are optional now. I could leave without it meaning immediate collapse. But leaving means I'll never know what happens to them, never know if we bought them enough time to matter." Marcus understood. The caring was the trap. "You should go," Marcus said. "What about you?" He thought about the stone in his quarters, about Kerith who didn't remember him, about a daughter named Emma who probably thought he was dead. "I don't know. Part of me wants to leave. But the other part is too broken to imagine what that life would look like," Sarah finished. "Yeah, same." They stood at the observation port together. "Maybe we're both too damaged to leave," Sarah said. "So maybe we stay because we don't know how to be anything except what this place made us. Maybe. Or maybe we stay because we care, and caring means accepting that we'll watch them die anyway, just more slowly." Sarah laughed without humor. "That's incredibly bleak. It's incredibly true." In the end, Sarah decided to stay. Marcus watched her tell David, watched the engineer accept her choice with understanding. David left on schedule. Marcus and Sarah stood at the observation deck and watched the ship detach, watched it accelerate into darkness, watched it disappear. "We could have been on that ship," Sarah said. "Yeah. Do you regret staying?" Marcus thought about it honestly. "No, I regret a lot of things, but staying isn't one of them." The station continued its rotation. The synthesis distribution expanded. Sarah's sessions continued at reduced frequency. And the Velthara continued their careful countdown to ending, using the time Marcus and Sarah had purchased to finish what mattered. 18 months, then darkness. But 18 months of consciousness, of choice, of being themselves before the hollow, took everything. Marcus sat in his quarters and held Kerith's stone and tried to believe that was enough. The final months moved with slow inevitability. Marcus watched the Velthara population shift as the hollow progressed, watched individuals he'd known lose themselves by degrees. Kerith died in the 15th month, not from the hollow directly, but from the cascade failures it caused. She died without recognizing Marcus. Marcus attended the memorial, a Velthara tradition he didn't fully understand. They didn't bury their dead. Instead, they documented them. Comprehensive records of accomplishments, relationships, moments that defined them. Kerith's documentation took 6 hours. Marcus added his own memories, the conversation at the observation deck, the night she'd given him the stone, the way she'd named the accumulation consuming them both. When he finished, several Velthara approached. One was young Lyris, now 12, her hollow arrested enough that she'd retained language. "Did Kerith matter to you?" Lyris asked. "Yes, very much. Even though you couldn't save her. Especially because I couldn't save her. Mattering doesn't require salvation. Just witnessing. Just being present while someone is themselves." Lyris considered this, then, "You witnessed me too. When I couldn't remember my own name. You held me and I felt safe. That mattered." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not healing exactly, but recognition. The sessions hadn't saved anyone, but time had mattered. Had given people space to be witnessed. Maybe that was enough. Sarah attended the memorial too. She'd been reducing her sessions steadily as the synthesis improved. 37 patients left in my rotation," she said quietly. "Down from hundreds. How are you managing it?" "Better than I was. The synthesis gives me space to actually think, to be present instead of just surviving." Marcus envied that. His own recovery had plateaued, physically improved but psychologically stuck. In the 16th month, the consensus requested his presence at a final meeting. Marcus arrived to find the chamber fuller than usual. Dr. Silrith spoke first. "We wanted to acknowledge what you and Sarah Chen provided, the synthesis we've developed, the time we've had, the dignity with which we're approaching our ending. All of this traces back to your presence." Marcus didn't know how to respond. We didn't save you. No, but you witnessed us. Gave us time to witness ourselves, to document who we are before we forget. That gift is larger than you understand. Other Velthara spoke, sharing similar sentiments. Marcus listened and tried to believe their gratitude wasn't just rationalization. When the meeting ended, Lyris approached him one final time. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that I remember the sessions, remember feeling safe. Remember your heartbeat and the way you never rushed me. You taught me that care exists even in the worst circumstances. I'll carry that as long as I can remember anything." Marcus knelt down to her level. "You weren't a burden. You were a person who needed help, and I was glad I could provide it. Even though it broke you." The question was direct. Marcus appreciated it. "Even though it broke me. Some things are worth breaking for." Lyris hugged him, a gesture the Velthara had learned from humans. Marcus held her and felt her alive, conscious herself. In the 17th month, the station began preparing for ending. Not sudden death, but planned shutdown. Systems deactivated in sequence, resources allocated to final documentation. Sarah reduced her sessions to 0. The synthesis was covering enough that direct contact was optional. She spent her final rotations saying goodbye, witnessing their final months of consciousness. Marcus did the same, visiting individuals he'd treated, learning what had become of them. Tavek showed Marcus his completed research. "You gave me this," Tavek said. "Time to finish. That's worth more than longevity without purpose." In the final weeks, Dr. Silreth came with an unexpected request. "The consensus wants to know if you'll remain through the ending. To witness. To document from a human perspective." Marcus thought about watching everyone he'd known lose themselves, about bearing witness to the Hollow's final victory. "Yes," he said. "I'll stay. It won't be easy. The Hollow in final stages is watching minds dissolve while bodies continue. You'll carry that memory." "I know, but they witnessed me when I was breaking. It's only fair I witness them." So Marcus stayed, through the final weeks as the Hollow claimed the last resistant individuals, through the careful documentation of cultural practices, through the systematic shutdown of station systems. Sarah stayed too for the same reasons, because caring meant witnessing, because witnessing meant honoring. They sat together at the observation deck on the final day when Velthara consciousness functionally ended, when the last individuals capable of memory lost those abilities, when the station became populated by bodies that breathed but no longer knew who they were. "We gave them 2 years," Sarah said. "Was it enough?" Marcus looked at the stars. "I don't know. Ask me in 2 years when I've figured out how to carry this." They remained on the station for another month, maintaining the archive systems. Then they activated the beacon David had installed, a signal that would eventually reach human space. And then they waited. Marcus held Kerith's stone and tried to believe that witness was enough, that presence mattered even when it couldn't save. He still wasn't sure, probably would never be sure. But he carried it anyway, because the alternative was letting it fall, and he'd learned that some burdens couldn't be set down, even when they became too heavy to hold. The rescue ship arrived in the 19th month, human corporation funded, following the beacon signal. They found 2 humans and a station full of bodies that still breathed, but no longer knew themselves. The rescue team documented everything, took statements from Marcus and Sarah, tried to understand what had happened. Marcus told them the technical details. He didn't tell them about Kerith or the weight of being necessary. Those parts weren't translatable. Sarah told them about the synthesis, about protocols. She didn't tell them about the cost. The rescue team wanted them to leave immediately. Marcus and Sarah insisted on staying until the archive transfer was complete. 3 weeks later, they boarded the rescue ship. The Velthara bodies were left on the station with automated life support. The archive was preserved. The journey back to human space took 8 months. Marcus and Sarah spent most of it in recovery, psychological debriefings, medical treatments. The corporation wanted to study them. Marcus and Sarah refused consent for invasive testing. They were given options: return to Earth, settle on colonial stations, take jobs with the corporation. Freedom to choose what came next, except neither knew how to choose. Marcus thought about Emma constantly. His daughter would be 28 now. He could find her, could try to explain where he'd been, or he could stay away. Could accept that Marcus Rain, the father, had died 2 years ago. 3 months before reaching Earth, Marcus and Sarah sat in the observation deck of the rescue ship. "Are you going to find Emma?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked at stars that were finally familiar. "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it would be cruel. She deserves to know you survived. Maybe, or maybe she deserves to keep the memory of her father that she has, instead of getting whatever this is." He gestured at himself. Sarah was quiet then. "I'm not going back to my family, I've decided. They mourned me, moved on. I can't fit back into being their daughter. That person died. What will you do? Find a way to make the witnessing matter. Maybe work with the archive. Maybe just exist somewhere quiet and try to figure out who I am when I'm not being used up by necessity." She turned to look at him. "What about you?" Marcus thought about Kerith's stone, packed carefully in his belongings. "Same thing. Try to make it matter. Try to figure out what's left when necessity doesn't define you anymore. That's terrifying." "Yeah." They reached Earth orbit 1 month later. Marcus stood in the arrival terminal and stared at the planet below, blue and white and green. He didn't know if home existed anymore. His terminal pinged with a message. Emma. She'd been notified of his survival, had left contact information. The message was brief. "Dad, I heard you're back. If you want to talk, I'm here. If you want to talk." Not demanding reunion, just offering possibility. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he made a decision. He sent a reply. "I'm here. I don't know if I'm the father you remember, but I'd like to try talking." They met 3 days later at a cafe, a neutral space. Emma arrived first, tall, dark-haired, with his eyes and a wariness that came from 24 years of being abandoned. Marcus sat down across from her and tried to find words. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for leaving, for staying gone, for being the kind of father who ran instead of staying." Emma studied him. "Are you different now? Or just sorry you got caught?" "Both, maybe, I don't know. I'm different because the last 2 years changed me in ways I can't explain. But I was running before that." "Why?" "Because I didn't know how to matter except through being useful at jobs, and being a father required mattering in ways I didn't know how to access." Emma was quiet. Then, "The corporation sent files about what you did with the Velthara so you could stay for them. But you couldn't stay for me when I needed a father." The question landed like truth, like the fundamental accusation Marcus had been avoiding for 24 years. "You're right," he said. "I could stay for them because it was about my biochemistry, about being useful in a way that was clear and measurable. But being your father required being useful in ways I didn't know how to measure." Emma looked at him with eyes so much like his own. "Are you going to run now? Now that the conversation is hard?" Marcus thought about the impulse to leave. The impulse was there, familiar, but something had changed. The Velthara had broken him, had taught him that being necessary wasn't the same as mattering, but that witness had value anyway. "No," he said, "I'm not going to run. I'm not. I'm going to sit here and be uncomfortable and try to figure out if there's anything left that could resemble being your father, even though you don't know if you can succeed. Especially because I don't know if I can succeed. The Velthara taught me that trying matters even when the outcome is already determined, that witness counts even when you can't save, that being present is worth the breaking." Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she reached across the table and took his trembling hand in hers, her grip steady and warm. "Okay," she said. "Then let's try." Marcus held his daughter's hand and felt tears on his face for the first time since collapsing 9 months ago. Felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed since he'd first learned to run. They talked for 3 hours. Marcus told her about the Hollow and the sessions, about Kerith and Lyris. Emma told him about her life, her work as an environmental engineer, her partner of 4 years, the child they were planning to have. He was going to be a grandfather. When they parted, Emma gave him her contact information and extracted a promise that he would use it, would stay present. Marcus made that promise, meant it with the same intensity he'd meant every session with the Velthara. He returned to his temporary quarters and unpacked Kerith's stone, setting it on the small desk where he could see it. A reminder of caring that couldn't save, of meaning that was smaller than he'd wanted but real anyway. Sarah messaged him that night. "Did you see Emma?" "Yeah. Going to try being a father. Probably going to fail at it, but going to try. That's more than most people do. What about you?" What's next? Applied to work with the archive translation team. Figure if I can't save the Velthera, at least I can help preserve what they were. That's good, that matters. Maybe. Ask me in 20 years when I've figured out if witnessing was enough. Marcus smiled at that. The same response he'd given the Velthera, the same uncertainty about whether meaning was adequate. He still didn't have an answer. Probably would never have an answer, but he was learning to carry the question anyway. Outside his window, Earth turned in its orbit. Indifferent to the small catastrophes and smaller victories happening on its surface, Marcus watched the planet rotate and tried to believe that being broken by caring was better than remaining whole through isolation. That witness counted even when it couldn't save, that trying mattered even when failure was possible. Tried to believe he could learn to be a father, a person, someone who stayed. Tried to believe the Velthera had taught him something worth carrying forward, instead of something that just needed to be survived. The stone on his desk caught the light, dark and smooth and warm from being held. A gift from someone who'd forgotten him, who'd lost herself to the hollow, who'd existed long enough to matter before the ending. Marcus held it one more time and made a different promise, not to be useful, not to be necessary, but to be present, to witness, to try, to stay.